Hi there, my name is Florine and I'm a developer.
And my name is Adrian and I'm a designer, and today we're going to talk about a new design and development tool.
Okay Adrian, now I'm curious, what is this new design and development tool going to be?
Well, you know this. We wrote a blog post about this recently, and it's about finding common languages. And a large part of finding common languages between designers and developers is sketching, which we both enjoy, which is also why we don't have laptops today.
Yeah. Ooh, we're going to go, how do you call it? Retro? So we're going to do...
No, it's just old school.
We're going to do web development without a computer.
Yeah, which is really interesting.
That's quite awesome.
Yeah.
So, but first, what are we drinking today?
Today we are drinking a strawberry and rhubarb posh pop from the UK.
Ooh.
It's going to be interesting.
I like it.
Yeah, it's good. Very sweet, but I like it.
Okay. Sketching.
Sketching, yeah.
This is a design thing, isn't it?
It's sort of a design thing. Anyone who studied design had to go to school, and they would, tell you, yeah, you have to do this assignment, and then document your process with a lot of sketches. You have to show how you arrived at the solution you arrived at.
How did that work out?
I usually fake them afterwards. I made the first thing that came to my head, and then I thought, that's good, and then I just, oh shit, I need some sketches. I'll just scribble them right before I went into a presentation. So yeah, that's how that works. But basically, sketches are very valuable, especially if you work in teams with developers, because it's a distraction-free thinking tool. You can just make something, and it's very accessible.
Yeah, and of course I said to you that it's more of a design thing, but when I look at my own work, I see that we do a lot of sketching as developers as well, and it may not always be. It has different purpose, I think.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I was going to ask you because designers they sketch. Well, for me, I sketch in two ways. I sketch the largest portion of sketching for me is figuring out how does something work, and I think that's where there's some overlap.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, because what we do when we're sketching, we for us there's also two things that we do with sketches. One is communicating. I have this idea or I have this problem, and how can we solve it? And that's a way of visualizing my idea or my problem.
That's pretty much when we work together. So that's like something where we are in the phase where we want to gather as many ideas as we can. So we use sketching because it's accessible and pretty much everyone can have a say and have their way of thinking or their idea brought to the table, which is really cool.
Exactly.
So that's where we sort of meet. And
yes.
The other way?
And the other way is kind of to visualize. For me, it's to structure something in my head. Let's say I'm working on an algorithm, or I have a process I need to visualize, I need to make sense of in my head. And what I do for myself is I'm going to draw some kind of flow chart. It's not going to be very nice or very good. It helps me think about, okay, what are the steps here and what are the different edge cases, and it's just a thinking tool for me then.
Okay, so basically this would be like you make a flow chart of it starts here, and then if this, then that.
Exactly.
You just run through the process.
Yes. For instance, if I wanted to do in Europe we have this IBAN numbering system, so we need to do say for instance I want to have create a tool or have to validate such a bank account number.
Or a credit card number.
Or a credit card number. So I can write down the rules and I can make a flow chart where I have all the steps in it. So I have visualized my problem, and it makes writing the code much easier because it's just a translation of these steps and then build the implementation. And I already know what's going to come next because I worked it out on paper.
Yeah, because sketching in this sense is also like it's a low-cost prototyping tool. Like you can figure
Absolutely,
out
absolutely.
where do things go wrong in my thinking, because you can't really map it out, especially if it's like a complex system. You can't map things out in its entirety in your head and then think that's going to work. So you put them down on paper and then you just like scribble in small little notes where you miss something, or you just redraw it a couple of times, or rearrange your sticky notes, which is also a really cool way of visualizing your ideas.
Exactly. But you mentioned you have also two ways of thinking. You mentioned that you do it to also visualize ideas, to try things out, to
Exactly.
to define function.
Yeah, to define function, because for me, function is the primary aspect where we as designers need to advocate for our users. So we need to take very great care in how we develop interaction and how function actually functions.
I agree with that.
And this is also why it's very important for us to involve developers and other specialities in this thought process.
Clients?
On occasion, it depends on the client. Some clients who have like in-house development teams, they can be very, very useful in this. But sometimes if it's more of a technical development thing, then, you know, they are clients, they have their own expertise in their areas, and it's not very nice to draw them out of their comfort zone and
is this because they lack the abstraction to deal with? Because for me, a sketch is always an abstraction. It's an idea or something.
It's a very crude rendering of what you want, what you mean.
It's an abstraction, which has its pros and cons. So is it a problem that the client maybe doesn't have the abstraction level that you require to interpret these sketches or to join in the sketching?
Well, there are definitely clients who can to have this level of abstraction and who can join in the conversation and who can add to the conversation by injecting their ideas, and you know they have something to bring to the table. But for other clients, you know, you are hired as a designer to solve a problem. I mean, if they could solve their own problem, they wouldn't have to hire you.
No.
So this is where, you know, there's a fine line.
Yeah.
It changes varying on the designer.
But still,
or the client.
Yeah. We're still talking about one part of the sketching.
We're still talking about one part.
You still haven't told me what this secret other thing is.
The secret other thing is not that secret, because basically the large part is figuring out how something works. So you don't worry about how it looks. And the second,
yes, you told me.
I told you. Yeah, I'm getting to it. Calm down. And the second part is obviously how does something look, because I design in code, and that means I have lost a large part of what you see is what you get in Photoshop or Illustrator or Webflow or Macaw or any of these other tools.
Do you miss that?
Not really. I find sketching a very adequate replacement, and it's much quicker than actually mocking stuff up.
Okay.
So it's much faster. I can do a couple of pages in 20 minutes if I wanted to.
Okay.
But do that in Photoshop, it's very difficult.
Can you show me how that works?
Yeah, sure. So here's an example from our Dev and Developer website. And as you can see, this is like the initial state. And basically what I've sketched here is it's a block that we use to show which conferences we'll be speaking at.
Okay.
And what I've sketched out here, and it's very rudimentary, is what happens when I mouse over this. It's just a crude example, but...
Okay, so you also work out the interaction in the sketch. You have like different states.
Sometimes I do like keyframing, so I use separate images of the same thing to show what happens. But usually, unless they are very complicated interactions where things move in many different directions and many things happening at the same time, I don't keyframe it. For like simple transitions, it's easier to just let the browser render it. quicker that
Oh,
way.
yeah, okay, you can just do it like in the to experiment in the web dev tools in the dev
Exactly.
tools or
Yeah.
something like
So
that.
and there you have like in Chrome you're getting some timeline controls for animations and stuff. So for some reasons, for some purposes, it's not necessary to sketch everything out, which is really cool.
Okay, so this is the part where about the functional
That's
way.
still we're still talking about the functional thing, but also as you can see here, there are visual aspects to this, like or how something looks. So for instance, the mouse over will give these triangles that sort of swoop into the frame.
Okay.
And I've sketched those because I need to know what they sort of look like.
Okay.
Just it's a crude representation in my head. I can imagine what they look like, and then build them. But it sometimes helps to sketch things out.
Okay.
And I also use it for like a structural.
So kind of wireframing.
Basically wireframe. Yeah. How is a website built up, and how do the different objects relate to each other? In what order are they? That sort of thing. And it's also helpful to sketch out, for instance, if you want something responsive or you want something to,
Okay.
if you go from mobile first and you work your way up.
Isn't that a lot of work? You're making a sketch for the desktop version, mobile version, or is it more like I can do the basics in the browser, but this may need some special attention, and I'm going to.
I usually
work
call
that
out stuff.
Okay.
So I make like a global sketch, like the entire page, for instance, and then I take one piece and I put it in something else, and then sketch that out there. And usually these have very short lifespan, so it's really quick and dirty. You sketch it out, and then you show it to a developer or to a UX person or whoever else is working with you, and you talk about it. And after that, this idea may get adopted or it may get adapted, and then you move on. And after that, the sketch loses its value.
And then you just throw it in the trash. And
I usually archive them just for prosperity's sake.
we talked about archiving in version control. So you're instead of amassing megabytes, you amass paper.
At the end of the project, they will be destroyed. So
okay, that's
unless they're really nice sketches,
makes
which
sense,
I keep.
of course. Okay.
So yeah, that's pretty much the sketching workflow. But I really like it because it's very accessible, and it gets people in a room to talk to each other that normally would have difficulty communicating their ideas. Because we as designers, we have this habit of like, I got this idea, I'll go to Photoshop and I'll mock it up there, which basically excludes everyone else from participating. Because everyone who is not fluent in Photoshop cannot talk the same language.
No, and it's kind of I myself, for sketching at the office, we use when we have a problem or when we want to discuss something, we use a whiteboard, because there are just a couple of developers, maybe sometimes a designer, is standing around a whiteboard and thinking about the idea. And I love a whiteboard because you take the eraser and you're going to erase the little bit there, a little bit here, and
take
then
pictures in between with
for instance, and everybody can get a pen and say, okay, no, this does not make any sense, or maybe we should do it in another way. And these sketches, they look really ugly, but they're here
It doesn't matter.
communicate an idea.
I mean, as long as everyone understands what is meant, it really doesn't matter what the sketch actually looks like. It helps if your handwriting is legible. We had some issues with that sometimes.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, everyone is free to sketch as they like. And because the internet is basically a bunch of boxes, it's a controversial idea. It's a bunch of boxes.
It's a bunch of boxes, yeah.
So
you can add round corners though. Don't forget the round corner box.
I never sketch round corners. That's like beautifying. That's way too early for that.
Okay, yeah.
So how else do you guys use sketching? Do you guys also use it for instance, structural things?
Yeah, we use it to discuss a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Say we want to place a couple of boxes next to each other. And what we do is we sketch out, okay, we have maybe sometimes we have a fixed HTML structure, and then we have to figure out how are we going to use the elements, and what kind of selectors can we use to make this work with the HTML we got. So what we do, we're drawing boxes on a whiteboard, and I'm I'm going to do this on paper here, but so we have, let's say we have a container, and we want the container to be stretchy. We want it to stretch according to the content.
Yeah.
But in there we have a title. So we just draw boxes, and then we have 3 columns. Now we have to figure out how we're going to, let's say we don't have, or we have some visual elements that we want to be placed within this. So we have an image, and we have some text, but the text is not equally long on all these columns. So
Okay, so they'll be uneven.
They will be uneven, but still the background needs to be stretched.
Yeah.
There are several solutions how to achieve this, and what we do is we draw out also the different margins. Okay, let's say we have a margin here, and we want to have a margin here, and especially if you have a next block underneath it, and how are we going to deal with margin collapsing and stuff like that. So we're going to draw it out and see, okay, if we put the margin at the top of the element, what's going to happen? We're going to put it at the bottom, how will it work? So then we create this, and sometimes we're not convinced yet, and what we do is we use a tool like JSBin or JSFiddle to mock up a quick demo and see, maybe this can work or maybe this can't work.
Yeah.
So that's how we use sketching, and we do this at a whiteboard, so it's really visible, so we can use it as a communication tool with each other.
Yeah.
So it's
okay. So like if multiple developers were working on the same thing, then we all are on the same page on what are we going to do and how are we going to solve
exactly.
this. And I think this is especially valuable if you think of your websites as systems, that you are consistent in the way you solve these problems throughout the site. So that's
of course that's maybe content for another episode.
That's another episode, but it's still important also for this if you want to keep your websites looking consistent. That would definitely help.
True.
Okay.
So I love sketching. You love sketching. Can there be drawbacks to sketching?
There can be drawbacks, I guess. One of the drawbacks I've noticed is that some people are a bit self-conscious when it comes to sketching. I don't know why, because basically I do my best to sketch as ugly as I can.
But yours always look better than mine.
Yeah, but it shouldn't matter what they look like.
No, exactly, and that's.
I mean, in the end, it's about how does something work, or for the largest part, it's about how something works. And I don't know why people are self-conscious, especially if it's like a group. And I feel this more with developers. Like I've had less problems with like UX people who are more comfortable sketching their stuff out, or other designers who are, they do this all day, every day. Especially developers are very conscious about how their sketches look, which is really not
the point.
It's not important.
No.
And
well, another thing I can think of is that a sketch is valuable at the moment you create it. A sketch is going to be useless in a couple of weeks' time, or to someone that wasn't involved in the discussion, because it doesn't make sense, because it's some scribbly. It
has no context, basically.
It has no context, yeah. So it's really something, at least for us as developers, it's really something, okay, we do on the whiteboard, and then we discuss it. Okay, now we have a solution, or multiple solutions, and we have to do some experimenting, and then we're done. Then we wipe out the whiteboard, destroy it, and we move on, because more often than not, I see someone coming in at the office the next day who wasn't there, and he was like,
"What?
Okay, what's this then?"
And why did you reach this conclusion? Why did you pick this over that?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be easier? And sometimes that can be like, you work an afternoon on something, and you're like, "Yes, this is a good solution." Everyone agrees, and the next morning someone comes in who isn't there, and he's like,
Why didn't you
do that? I mean, everyone's like, "Oh shit."
Yeah. Maybe, yeah,
it happens.
It happens.
But yeah, that's a good point. Sketches without context can be very confusing and can sometimes miscommunicate quite badly. But then again, I'd like to say again that you cannot learn anything from like a fully designed comp that you cannot learn from like a dirty sketch on a crumpled napkin. About function, you can't learn anything more. So
I agree with you there. I want to know one more thing. Your sketches, they look really good, and they have color in them and different grayscale. So what do you need to get started?
to get started, you need paper and a pencil, basically. So
Okay, I got one. I got one right here.
Oh, this is a very hipster pencil. So
Oh, okay, sorry.
It shouldn't be about like a high tech it shouldn't be an expensive endeavor if you want to get started in sketching.
But I want to make sketches like you do because they're so cool. They look really good.
I really like Copic markers. They're like dye markers, so you have to use them on bleed-proof paper because otherwise it just bleeds through. Unlike normal printer paper, your table will be inked very quickly.
Okay.
But they have beautiful colors and a wide array of availability throughout at least Europe. I don't know what it's like in the US. They're from Japan. I also like their fine liners.
Okay.
I think I recommended some of those to you.
Just for the writing bits.
Writing and just like the big outlines of stuff. I use those. I also really like what's called a Molotov marker. They are acrylic paint markers. These are very dangerous if you get them on your clothes. Don't do that. But they are like, they will cover over everything. They are not translucent.
It's like the magic erase thing where you can.
Yeah, so you can just like use a white mark to, if you want like a highlight in something, but you've already made it black, then you can just paint in a white highlight.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool.
Okay.
And other than that, I use a lot of pencils. I really like pencils
Okay.
because they're easy and accessible.
Okay. Well, I hope you liked how we showed you how you can sketch as a developer, but also as a designer. So, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Please comment and tell us what you thought of the episode. Subscribe. And we'd like to thank DigiPaint for allowing us to use this room for recording. We'd also like to thank the lovely Lieke Esveld of Esveld Photo, who is helping us tape all these episodes. Thank you very much, and keep on sketching.